What happens aback above Admiral sits bottomward for what seems like he accepted account alone for it to backfire into one of the best advancing exchanges any time captured on television. What you're about to addicent is a chat that starts with political pleasantries, but rapidly descends into accusations, interruptions, and ultimately a affecting avenue that Cypher saw coming. This is the adventure of how a simple catechism angry into a all-encompassing battle that concluded with Donald Trump walking off the set of a above-arrangement interview, abrogation George Stephanopoulos and his aggregation absolutely stunned. Before we dive into this absurd exchange, accomplish abiding you hit that subscribe button and beat a animate version beneath cogent me what you anticipate about how this account unfolds. Assurance me. Your activity to appetite to allotment your thoughts on this one. The flat lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and George Stephanopoulos sat beyond from Donald Trump in what was billed as an exclusive, complete interview. The authority seemed accepted enough, 2 chairs positioned at an angle, a aloof backdrop, and the affectionate of able atmosphere you'd apprehend from a high-profile political interview. Stephanopoulos had his addendum prepared. Trump had agreed to the account, and aggregate appeared accessible for an affable chat about policy, politics, and the accepted accompaniment of the nation. Stephanopoulos opened with what seemed like a softball catechism advised to affluence into the conversation. George, acceptable to acquire you here, he began, his accent abstinent and professional. I appetite to alpha by allurement about your angle on the economy. A lot of Americans are anxious about inflation, about their adeptness to accomplish ends meet. What's your appraisal of area we are appropriate now? Trump leaned back in his chair, his announcement confident. Well, George, I'll acquaint you what. The abridgment was the best it's any time been aback I was in office. Almanac low unemployment. Banal bazaar hitting best highs. We had it all ample out, and then, you apperceive what happened? They came in, and they destroyed aggregate we built. Everything. Bodies are adversity now because of behavior that accomplish no sense. Behavior that aching the alive man. Aching families. Aching anybody except the bodies at the actual top who assume to account no amount what happens. Stephanopoulos nodded, authoritative a calendar on his paper. So, your adage the accepted administration's behavior are amenable for the bread-and-butter challenges bodies are facing? Trump, a secular, a feel for emphasis. Not aloof, responsible, George. They're absolutely responsible. Aback I larboard office, we had activity independence. We were bearing our own oil, our own gas. Prices were low. Aggregate was active smoothly. Now bodies can't allow to ample up their tanks. They can't allow groceries. It's a disaster. And complete disaster. And it didn't acquire to be this way. The host confused in his bench advancing for his abutting question. Let's allocution about some of the specifics because I anticipate admirers' appetite to acquire the capacity here. You mentioned activity policy. There are those who altercate that all-around factors, accumulation-alternation issues from the pandemic, all-embracing conflicts. These all played a role in what we're seeing economically. How do you accede to that? This is area the temperature in the allowance began to change. Trump's announcement confused slightly. A adumbration of affliction bridge his face. All-around factors. George, appear on. You apperceive bigger than that. Yes, there are consistently all-around factors, but administering matters. Aback you. Acquire able leadership. Aback you acquire addition. Who knows how to negotiate? Who knows how to put America first? You cantankerous those challenges. You don't let them abort your economy. That's the aberration amid my administering and what we're seeing now. Stephanopoulos apprenticed forward. But accurately on energy, the altercation from the added ancillary is that the alteration to renewable. Activity is all important for abiding sustainability for ecology concerns. Do you see any authority in that position? Trump befuddled his arch firmly. Renewable energy, sure, I'm all for it. Aback it makes sense. Aback it's ready. Aback it's affordable. But you don't abort your absolute activity basement before you acquire applicable alternative. That's aloof accepted sense, George. You don't shut bottomward pipelines. You don't stop drilling. You don't accomplish your country based on added nations for activity aback. You acquire assets appropriate here. That's not policy. That's ideology. And Credo doesn't accumulate the lights on or put aliment on the table. The accuser glanced at his addendum again. Let's about face to addition affair that I apperceive is important to a lot of people. Immigration. There's been a lot of agitation about bound security, about clearing policy. Beneath your administration, there were behavior that were absolutely controversial. Family separations at the border, the biking ban, the advance for a bound wall. Attractive back, do you angle by all of those decisions? Here's area you could see Trump's activity change completely. He sat advanced in his chair, his articulation demography on a added advancing tone. George, let me stop you appropriate there. Family separations. That's a media anecdotal that was absolutely out of proportion. Every administering has had to accord with the absoluteness that a back bodies cantankerous the bound illegally and they're detained. There are processes that acquire to be followed. What we did was accomplish the law, article that seems to be abandoned abstraction now. And the wall. The bank works, George. Everywhere we congenital it, actionable crossings went bottomward dramatically. That's aloof a fact, Stephanopoulos interjected. But the images of accouchement in apprehension facilities, families' actuality separated, that created a cogent backlash. Do you acquire any abjure about how that was handled, about the animal amount of those policies? Trump's jaw tightened. Regrets. I'll acquaint you what I regret. I affliction that the media and bluntly George networks like castigation focused on affecting images while blank the bigger picture. You apperceive what's absolutely adverse to children? Trafficking. The cartel's application accouchement to get beyond the border. The alarming adventure these families accomplish because they anticipate they can get in. We were aggravating to accelerate a bulletin that if you appear actuality illegally, there are consequences. That's not cruel. That's administering of the law. And it's absolutely the compassionate position because it deters bodies from authoritative that alarming adventure in the aboriginal place. But wouldn't you agree, Stephanopoulos continued, his accent acceptable hardly added a secular that there's an altruistic basal to this that has to be considered. These are families beat violence, beat poverty, gluttonous a bigger life. Trump aloft his articulation slightly. Of course, there's a altruistic component, George, and cipher cares added about bodies than I do. But you apperceive what abroad is humanitarian. Attention American citizens, attention American jobs, authoritative abiding, we're not afflicted by bodies. Calamity beyond the bound, afterwards any process, afterwards any vetting. You acquire to acquire a country, George. You acquire to acquire borders. Every added nation understands this, but somehow aback America tries to accomplish its borders. We're the bad guys. That's ridiculous. The chat was escalating, and Stephanopoulos seemed to admit it. He took an animation and approved to redirect. Let's allocution about article else. Your time and appointment was apparent by cogent controversy investigations, allegation affairs to impeachments. In fact, how do you reflect on that period? Do you acquire those were politically motivated, or do you anticipate there were accepted, apropos actuality raised? And there it was, the catechism that would change everything. Trump's face blurred immediately. Oh, actuality we go, he said, his articulation decrepit with sarcasm. I was apprehensive aback we'd get to this, George. To adulterated impeachments, both absolutely. Political. Both advised to baffle with my admiral and aching me politically. You apperceive it, I apperceive it, anybody watching knows it. It was a witch coursing from day one, and the actuality that you're alike allurement me this catechism in this way shows that some bodies still can't acquire that. I won in 2016, and that I able added in 4 years than best presidents do in 8. Stephanopoulos captivated his ground. But these weren't aloof accessory attacks. There were specific allegations. Ukraine, the contest of January 6th. These were austere affairs that were advised by Congress that led to allegation votes. R. You adage there was absolutely no base for any of it. Trump a secular anon at Stephanopoulos. That's absolutely what I'm saying, George. Perfect buzz alarm with Ukraine. You. Bethink that? Perfect. And January 6th I told bodies to affably and patriotically accomplish their choir herd. But that allotment doesn't get reported, does it? No. Instead, we get this anecdotal that I'm somehow amenable for what added bodies did. Bodies I had no ascendancy over. It's outrageous. And, frankly, George, I'm abashed your activity bottomward this alley because I anticipation we were actuality to acquire a absolute conversation, not to change the aforementioned discredited attacks that bootless the aboriginal time, the additional time, and every time since. Stephanopoulos leaned forward. His journalistic instincts acutely blame him to accompany this band of analytic admitting the assent tension. With all due respect, these aren't aloof attacks. These are affairs of accessible record. There were testimonies. There was affirmation presented. There were votes in Congress. Are you suggesting that anybody who aloft concerns, including associates of your own party, were all amiss or all allotment of some conspiracy? Trump's acknowledgement came quickly. His articulation elevated. Yes, George, that's absolutely what I'm suggesting. You had bodies who were weak, bodies who were attractive to account political points, bodies who were abashed of the media advancing afterwards them. And yes, there were bodies who were allotment of a beyond accomplishment to booty me bottomward from the moment I came bottomward that escalator and appear my candidacy. This isn't cabal theory. This is accurate fact. The able Russia hoax Mueller analysis 2 and 1-2 years, and what did they find? Nothing, but it doesn't amount because the accident was done. The billow was there, and that was the able point. But the Mueller address didn't say nothing. Stephanopoulos countered. It categorical assorted instances of abeyant obstruction, and Mueller himself said he couldn't absolve you. Those are his words, not mine. Trump coiled his duke dismissively. Mueller was a disaster, George. Total disaster. Couldn't bethink basal facts aback, he testified. The able affair was a disgrace. And this abstraction that he couldn't absolve me, that's not how the amends arrangement works. And you apperceive it, you're innocent until accurate guilty, not the added way around. They couldn't prove annihilation because there was annihilation to prove. No collusion, no obstruction, nothing. But the anecdotal persists because it's advantageous for bodies who can't acquire the after-effects of an election. Stephanopoulos apprenticed on, acutely not abetment down. Let's allocution about acclamation after-effects then, because that brings us to addition cogent issue. Afterwards, the 2020 election, you fabricated abundant claims about fraud, about base-born elections, about irregularities. Assorted courts, including board you appointed, begin no affirmation of boundless fraud. Your own advocate accepted said there was no artifice that would acquire afflicted the outcome. At what point do you acquire that maybe, aloof maybe, you absent that acclamation fairly? The allowance seemed to contract. Trump's announcement confused from affliction to article after piece to anger. Actuality we go again, George. You're accomplishing absolutely what I knew you would do. This account was declared to be about the issues, about what affairs to Americans, and instead you appetite to comedy antic journalism. You appetite to advance narratives that acquire been debunked over and over. I'm not activity to sit actuality and let you mischaracterize what happened in 2020. I'm not mischaracterizing anything, Stephanopoulos replied, his own accent acceptable firmer. I'm citation what courts found, what your own admiral said. These aren't narratives. These are accurate allegation from investigations and acknowledged proceedings. The catechism is legitimate. Do you acquire the after-effects of that acclamation or not? Trump stood up hardly from his armchair before sitting back down, a concrete appearance of his frustration. You appetite me to acquire a chic system, George? You appetite me to acquire that aggregate was able to back we had mail and ballots calamity the arrangement with no verification? A back we had counting that went on for canicule and weeks? A back we had irregularities that any reasonable actuality would question? I've said from the beginning, let's acquire abounding argumentative audits. Let's attending at everything. Let's accomplish abiding it was legitimate. But instead, anyone who asks questions gets labeled as addition who's abstinent reality. That's not journalism, George. That's activism. But the audits that were conducted, Stephanopoulos interjected, in assorted states. Some by Republican officials, they accepted the results. They didn't acquisition the affectionate of artifice you're alleging. So, what's the accepted here? What would it booty for you to acquire the outcome? Trump's articulation rose again. The audits were incomplete. They were limited. They didn't attending at what bear to be looked at. And you apperceive what, George? Let me about face this about on you. Why are you so abashed of transparency? Why is allurement questions about acclamation candor somehow controversial? Every American should appetite to apperceive that their elections are secure, that their vote counts, that the arrangement works. But instead, bodies like you advance anyone who raises accepted a propos as if we're the problem. We're not the problem, George. The botheration is an arrangement that's accessible to abetment and a media that refuses to investigate it honestly. Stephanopoulos befuddled his head. I'm not abashed of transparency. I'm allurement you to exceed facts. Dozens of lawsuits were filed by your acknowledged aggregation, and they absent about all of them. Not because of media bias, but because they couldn't present affirmation that assertive judges, abounding of whom afresh were appointed by Republicans or by you personally. That's the administrative arrangement alive as designed. Trump leaned advanced aggressively. The administrative arrangement failed, George. They didn't appetite to blow it because it was too hot, too controversial. They hid abaft procedural issues, standing, timing, all kinds of excuses to abstain attractive at the evidence. And let's be honest here, the absolute enactment was a join us. The media, the courts, the bureaucracy, they all capital me gone, and they got what they wanted. But that doesn't accomplish it right. And it doesn't beggarly Americans acquire to acquire it afterwards question. The accuser took a abysmal breath, acutely aggravating to advance his composure. Let's move to addition affair because I anticipate we're activity in circles here. Your rhetoric, both during your admiral and after, has been characterized by abounding as divisive, as inflammatory. You've alleged the columnist the adversary of the people. You've attacked political opponents with actual claimed language. You've fabricated statements that critics say attenuate autonomous norms. Do you acquire your advice appearance has contributed to added animosity in this country? Trump looked at Stephanopoulos with an announcement that alloyed atheism and contempt. My advice style. George, you're absolutely allurement me this. I acquaint anon with the American people. I don't use focus aggregate talking points. I don't adumbrate abaft political correctness. I say what needs to be said. And yes, sometimes that upsets bodies who are acclimated to politicians who never booty a angle on anything. As for calling the columnist the adversary of the people, I angle by that for outlets that advisedly mislead, that aberration facts, that advance agendas instead of advertisement news. And you're sitting actuality proving my point by allurement slanted questions advised to accomplish me attending bad rather than absolutely exploring issues. These aren't slanted questions, Stephanopoulos responded, his courage acutely cutting thin. These are questions about your conduct, your statements, your actions. You're an accessible figure. You are president. You may run again. The accessible has a appropriate to acquire how you anticipate about these issues. Trump cut him off. The accessible understands absolutely how I think, George. They don't charge you to adapt it for them. They don't charge the clarify of a media that's been adverse from day one. And let me acquaint you article else. Aback where actuality so honest here, this account appropriate now is absolutely why bodies don't assurance boilerplate media anymore. You allure me actuality beneath the guise of a fair conversation, and afresh you absorb the absolute time advancing me with the aforementioned annoyed curve that everyone's heard a actor times. Area are the questions about my accomplishments. Area are the questions about the behavior that worked. Where's the altercation about what I would do abnormally activity forward? No, instead we're relitigating the able based on your adopted narrative. Stephanopoulos stiffened. I've asked you about policy. We discussed the economy, immigration, energy. You're the one whose demography breach had accepted after-effect questions. And frankly, if you can't handle boxy questions in an account setting, how do you apprehend to handle the challenges of accessible office? That band landed like a bomb. Trump's face ablaze and he acicular anon at the host. Don't you cartel catechism my adeptness to handle anything, George. I handled 4 years of aberrant attacks, investigations, impeachments, adverse media, and I still able-added than any admiral in avant-garde history. What I won't handle is sitting actuality lectured by addition, who's acutely got an agenda. You appetite boxy questions? Fine, but this isn't boxy questions. This is an ambuscade, and I'm not activity to participate in my own ambush. Stephanopoulos maintained his composure, admitting his articulation agitated a aciculate edge. This is not an ambush. This is journalism. Every catechism I've asked you is fair bold for addition in your position. If you agreed to this account cerebration, you'd alone get questions you liked. Afresh, maybe you didn't acquire what an account is declared to be. Trump stood up from his armchair this time, actual on his feet. Oh, I acquire perfectly, George. I acquire that you assignment for arrangement that's been adjoined me from the beginning. I acquire that you acclimated to assignment for the Clintons, so let's not pretend there's no bent here. I acquire that this able affair was set up to accomplish me attending bad. And you apperceive what? I'm not activity to accord you the satisfaction. The host additionally rose from his seat, his able address arise slightly. My able assignment has annihilation to do with this conversation. I'm allurement you the aforementioned questions any austere announcer would ask. And if you can't analyze amid fair analytic and bias, that says added about you than it does about me. Trump started to abolish his microphone, his movements aciculate and deliberate. It says that I am acute abundant to admit a back I'm actuality played. George, I've done bags of interviews. I apperceive the aberration amid addition who's absolutely absorbed in a chat, and addition who's aloof attractive for complete bites to use adjoin me. You've been adverse from Catechism 1, and I'm done with it. Stephanopoulos stepped closer, his articulation rising. I've been able from Catechism 1. You're the one who's gotten arresting at every turn, who's banned to accord beeline answers, who's attacked me alone rather than acclamation the actuality of what I'm asking. If you appetite to leave, fine, but don't pretend this is because I've been unfair. Trump pulled the microphone absolutely off and tossed it assimilate his chair. You appetite to allocution about beeline answers? How about you acknowledgement article for me, George? Why didn't you ask about the activity adeptness we achieved? Why didn't you ask about the barter deals I negotiated? Why didn't you ask about the bent amends reform, the befalling zones, the historically low unemployment for minorities? I'll acquaint you why. Because it doesn't fit your narrative. You alone appetite to focus on the abrogating because that's what your arrangement wants. That's what your admirers expects, and that's what you're programmed to do. We did altercate policy, Stephanopoulos attempt back, his own annoyance now evident. You're the one who angry every action catechism into affliction about how you've been treated. I asked about the abridgment, and you abhorrent your successor. I asked about clearing, and you complained about media coverage. I asked about your time and appointment, and you alleged investigations, witch hunts. At some point, you acquired to booty albatross for your own answers. Trump confused to join the bend of the set. His aegis detail, alpha, to stir. Responsibility. I booty abounding albatross for my successes, George, and there were abounding of them. What I won't booty albatross for is the media's backbiting coverage, the political establishment's attempts to demolition my admiral and interviews like this that are advised from the alpha to be hit pieces. You apperceive what the absolute botheration is? You can't angle that I succeeded admitting all of you. You can't angle that I affiliated with millions of Americans who saw through the debris you were selling. And you can't angle that I'm still here, still fighting, still relevant. Admitting aggregate you've befuddled at me." Stephanopoulos followed a few steps, his articulation aciculate and insistent. "Then break and avert your record. Break and acknowledgement the questions. If aggregate I'm allurement is so unfair, so biased, afresh explain to the admirers why. Accomplish your case. Don't aloof run abroad because you don't like the questions." Trump angry back, his face red with anger. "I'm not active abroad from anything, George. I'm walking abroad from a setup. There's a difference, and anybody watching this will see it. They'll see that I came actuality and acceptable faith, accessible to acquire absolute conversation. And instead, I got ambushed by Addition who had his anecdotal accounting of 4 I alike sat down. This account is over. But Stephanopoulos wasn't absolution it end that easily. His articulation agitated beyond the flat, loud abundant that Trump couldn't advise but apprehended alike as he started to airing away. So aback the questions get tough, you leave. Aback Addition challenges you, you airing out. Is that what voters should expect? Is that presidential behavior? Trump chock-full in his advance and angry about sharply. You appetite to allocution about presidential behavior. Let's allocution about it, George. Presidential behavior is continuing up to a base media. Presidential behavior is not absolution bodies like you ascendancy, the narrative. Presidential behavior is alive, aback your actuality disrespected, and accepting the courage to do article about it. I've sat through hours of adverse interviews. I've faced bottomward the toughest critics. I've been advised, added than any admiral in history. But what I won't do is sit actuality and be your punching bag while you pretend it's journalism. This is journalism, Stephanopoulos insisted, his articulation abiding admitting the anarchy unfolding. This is what captivation able bodies answerable looks like. If you can't differentiate amid accountability and hostility, afresh, maybe you shouldn't be gluttonous accessible office. Trump took several accomplish aback adjoin the set, pointing at Steph. You appetite to authority bodies accountable, George? How about captivation, your own arrangement answerable for years of affected news? How about captivation, the antecedent administering answerable for surveillance of my campaign? How about captivation, the bodies who pushed the Russia hoax answerable for 3 years of lies? No, you don't appetite accountability. You appetite careful case of bodies you disagree with politically, and I'm not activity to participate in it. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of the meltdown. Production agents stood frozen, borderline whether to arbitrate or let it comedy out. Stephanopoulos stood his ground. Aggregate I've asked you about has been documented, investigated, and appear by assorted sources. If you appetite to alarm that affected news, fine. But at some point aback anybody who investigates you, anybody who covers you, anybody who works with you comes to agnate conclusions. Maybe the botheration isn't anybody else. Trump's articulation accomplished a crescendo. Everyone. Let me acquaint you about everyone, George. Anybody said I couldn't win in 2016 and I won. Anybody said the abridgment would blast and we had the best abridgment ever. Anybody said my adopted action would alpha wars, and I'm the aboriginal admiral in decades who didn't alpha a new war. Anybody said accord in the Middle East was absurd, and we got the Abraham Accords. So absolve me if I don't put abundant banal in what anybody says, abnormally aback anybody as a media enactment that's been amiss about me from day one. Stephanopoulos bedeviled on this. So your adage everyone's amiss except you. Every court, every investigator, every journalist, every official who's aloft concerns. They're all amiss and you're the alone one who's right. Does that complete reasonable to you? Trump's jaw clenched. What sounds reasonable, George, is dupe the American bodies to accomplish up their own minds instead of accepting media elites acquaint them what to think. What sounds reasonable is acquainted that institutions can be corrupted, that able interests can alike adjoin outsiders, that the arrangement protects itself. You anticipate your speaking accuracy to power? You are the power, George. You and your arrangement and the absolute enactment media apparatus. I'm the one speaking accuracy to you. Afresh alleged, Stephanopoulos challenged. Break actuality and allege it. Acknowledgement the questions. Accomplish your case. Assurance those American bodies you accumulate talking. About to see through whatever bent you anticipate I have. But walking out doesn't prove annihilation except that you can't handle scrutiny. Trump started walking abroad again, added actually this time. I've handled added analysis than 10 presidents combined. George, what I won't handle is crumbling my time with addition who's not absorbed in truth, who's not absorbed in fairness, who's alone absorbed in accepting clips for the black account that accomplish me attending bad. This arrangement has been accomplishing hit pieces on me for years, and I'm done assuming it's annihilation added than what it is. One final question Stephanopoulos alleged out as Trump accomplished the bend of the set. If you become admiral again, will you acquire acclamation after effects if you lose? Will you accomplish to a peaceful alteration of power? Trump chock-full at the threshold, angry his arch slightly, but didn't absolutely face the camera. I'll acquire after effects that are fair and honest, George. That's what every American should demand. And as for peaceful alteration of power, I transferred ability affably afterwards, the aftermost acclamation admitting my concerns, admitting what I acquire were austere irregularities. But you'll never address that, will you? You'll aloof comedy this blow of me abrogation and circuit it about fits your agenda. He paused, appearing to accumulate his thoughts, the weight of the moment axiomatic in his features. The producers in his ear were assuredly scrambling, aggravating to amount out how to handle the situation, but Stephanopoulos affiliated acclamation the audience. Aback accessible abstracts debris to acknowledgement questions. Aback they advance journalists for accomplishing their jobs. Aback they airing abroad from accountability. Voters charged to booty calendar of that. This isn't about me. It isn't about this network. It's about whether bodies in ability can handle scrutiny, whether they can appoint with difficult questions, whether they can participate in the autonomous action of answering to the public. If you enjoyed this abysmal dive into one of the best atomic interviews in contempo political history, accomplish, abiding, you subscribe.